So this is the first podcast of this series. It'll be the pilot. Our goal for this is going to be getting information about people that are in Decentraland specifically to start off. We may venture out further as we get into the podcast, but we'll be covering information about each creator and how they got into Decentraland, what they're doing here, where they're trying to go. Talk a little bit about the DAO, and just get to know more people around Decentraland and what they're doing. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, everybody in here is going to already know it, but hopefully down the road people will come back and watch this.
All right, sure. Sure. First, thanks so much for having me as the first guest. For everybody watching, and for a few people here right now, this podcast that Josh is doing, it was somewhat an idea that I suggested to him, but of course, I know his content's all his own. But the reason I suggested it to him was I thought that of all people, throughout the last year and a half, 2 years, he's had such a unique position in the Decentraland community and world, and I just thought it would be interesting to hear him talk with people about what their experience has been like, since he's had quite an extensive one that's been out there in the public. So I'm looking forward to seeing what people have to say, what other people think about the DAO and all these things. So that's just to start off. So thanks for that. I really appreciate that that you're doing the series and that you thought it was a good idea too. So I'll be looking forward to seeing who else is on here. I guess I can introduce myself. So I guess you have me on the podcast here as Mr. Dr. Hamm.
Yes.
So that's
always
my
will
name.
Be named that.
That's my name I go by in Decentraland. It's both a joke and serious. I am a Mr. Hamm and a Dr. Hamm. I have a PhD in theoretical astrophysics. That is where the joke comes from. I've been making that a joke as like my online in-game screen names for quite some time now, because I was in graduate school finishing my my PhD for many years, and I was still playing games like RuneScape with Josh, and Mr. Dr. Hamm was kind of something I started doing a couple years ago, and then when I finally got to finishing it, I got to officially adopt the name. So that's what I go by. I think it's just it's funny. I'm not an extremely formal person. I know that a lot of people, they are really they really want to be referred to as the right title, but I just say Mr. Dr. Hamm as a way to kind of make fun of it, and just to kind of call back to where it came from. So that's who I am. That's where I came from in my like back upbringing and education and everything. I started getting involved in blockchain, Web3 stuff a few years ago. It was a really gradual process that happened for me throughout when I was in school. My main thing in school was, of course, to do research and focus on that. But being a really nerdy person and a really math-oriented person, and knowing Josh arguing about Bitcoin all the time, I just learned a lot about it and researched it myself in my own free time for fun. Learned about what is a hashing algorithm, what makes the networks actually secure, how does the consensus behind blockchain work, and all those technical aspects of it. That was really what was interesting to me. And I guess there's also part of me that's a little bit just distrustworthy of random people, and so that's beyond my interests in the technical things. But having blockchain technology as kind of a solution to needing to trust other people was really what makes me latch onto it as an idea that is important and could be really helpful for us. And it's that idea we can intermediate exchanges, transactions with each other, and not have to know each other, not have to have any trust in each other, but know that the end result of what we're doing is going to be what we both expect. And so that's something that really resonated with me as I learned about it. And so towards the end of school, I kind of went off the deep end and said, okay, I'm gonna go become an Ethereum contract engineer. I'll learn how to do all that and get a job in doing blockchain stuff. I did that. I actually started off working and doing privatized blockchain solutions. It's not quite what most of you know about what blockchain is, I bet, but it's what I started out with. And then about half a year into that, I got an opportunity to move over into public blockchain sector. Um, I do a lot of like smart contract integration and Web3 applications in my job. I can't disclose what I do exactly, but that is my current career. And then, of course, like completely separate from that, I have been working with Josh and Exodus for quite some time. You might know you might know me from the NFT giveaways that Josh does every single stream. He uses my software that I wrote a year and a half ago, uh, and so basically he started in Decentraland giving out NFTs, and I was watching his streams. It was really fun watching him click and copy and paste and say, okay, I'm sending Santa hat to Nargoth, to Black Label, and it's just one by one. That's great, but I thought it was really painful, and so I wanted a project for myself at the same time to kind of refine my programming skills with Web3 stuff. And so I built the program that Josh uses to send out all those NFTs and save his hand all the cramps, save all the copy pasting. And couple other people use it too. That was kind of my like intro in Decentraland. Aaron Loop also has given out, hundreds of thousands of Wi-Fi with it. It's I just think it's really fun.
So a couple things just to backtrack on what you said about you start off with Mr. Ham. When I first met you, that's what you were. You weren't a doctor at the time. I think you might have been a year into school, maybe not even. You might have just started.
So I think that I think I first let me think. I think I first met you in your like merchant clan, right? And
Yes,
it was like the second.
2014.
It was the second. That was the second, or going on the beginning of my third year in undergrad
Okay.
before I ever got my bachelor's, and so that was 7 years before I became Mr. Doctor Ham. That was in 2021, so I finished that. It was actually quite a experience. So the first 4 years of my graduate school was all in person and going to classes and teaching classes in person every day. And then the last 1 year of it became completely remote in 2020, 2021. And so I finished it not knowing I would actually have never like gone back onto the campus. So I did my most of my writing and my thesis alone in my home throughout 2021 and finished that around August.
I have a screenshot of I don't even remember what it says. I think it's March of 2014 actually in the chat. And so I know that I had started back I think in March of 2000 February of 2014. So I think I met you like within a month of being back in RuneScape after taking like 6 to 8 month break or something. But I do about the discussions we had in the past about me arguing with you a lot. There's one memory that will always be in my head, and it's the part when you came in and you said that it doesn't have an army. I remember that because I was actually in the hospital. No, I wasn't, like, it wasn't for me. For someone else, I was sitting there and I was on my laptop, and there was a few people in the room, and I just started aggressively typing back. And because I was just like, the network is the army, okay? That's what it is. The decentralized aspect of it is. So I was trying to explain that, and it's very difficult for me to put everything in a way that other people can understand it. But I remember that, and the person that was there, they're like, "You okay?" I was like, "Yeah, this person just thinks you need an army for money." And today I'm like, you know what? It really makes sense to have an army for money. That if the U.S. didn't have an army, the dollar would not be as near strong as where it is today. It's more like I'm going to force you to use it. Luckily, Wes, where'd you go to school?
I went to school at Duke.
And then another thing about that bot, your name has been on every single transaction. Your name goes on every one of them. Do you happen to know how many transaction that is, or approximate at this point?
I don't. I would have to go ask or look at how many Waifumon and how many of those eggs that X went over does. I would have to go see how many they've done and then add it up with how many you've done.
Yeah.
I think I'm closing in on 500,000,
Okay.
something around there.
Well,
So
Aaron Loop must have a ton. I'm at 80,000. I checked just
yeah,
yesterday.
he has sometimes he's had multiple instances of it at
Hmm.
once, all day long, all week long, sending them out. He's asked me some really crazy things like, can I get a list of like 800,000 people for him?
Oh my gosh! Imagine sending a list of 800,000 transactions out.
I can I can agree, like very aggressively arguing about this. And I would say I was probably being like I normally am when I argue with people, like somewhat stubborn but also serious at the same time.
Yeah.
And he just could not convince me. But it was kind of back at a point where I didn't know anything about it. Still, I didn't know anything about how the network actually worked.
Me
I just
neither.
knew it was just some internet. It was some internet money, and I thought it was. I think I probably thought there was a group of people that made it or something like that, and that group of people was out of luck because the army would march up and take away their Bitcoin or something. But that's
Right.
the product of not knowing, and also with just the assumptions that you can make when you read stuff online. If you went and you read 20 headlines about Bitcoin on Google, it would be interesting to see if that was all you knew about it, what you would think.
I mean, it also depends on definitely with the timing that you do that. End of last year would have been awful. Just like it's dirt, it's gone, it's dead, it's useless, it's a scam, it's going to take up all the electricity in the world. Yeah, you'd gotten out of school when you got into Decentraland, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At that point, I had been out of school.
So you knew about Decentraland, or at least the token, seemed like quite a while before I did. How did you hear about it? And then what made you even log in?
Um, so it's a really stupid reason. When I was looking at things on Coinbase and I was just throwing some money into some basically just YOLOing some money out into some coins that I thought might have a good run in the upcoming run, because it was before the halving had actually happened, before the long 2020-2021 bull market. I was just looking through Coinbase and I saw Mana. Back then, it's kind of funny to say back then, but like 2 years ago on Coinbase compared to now, there was what, like a tenth of the currency options that we have now. It's really expanded quite a lot. So of the 25 or so currencies that you could buy, Mana was one of them, and you could only buy it with USDC. You could not. There was not a USD pair for it at the moment. So that I just saw the name Mana, and I thought that was a cool name for a token. I researched it a little bit, and I did sign in to see that it was a functional product. I didn't do anything with the wearables. I actually didn't research that portion of it a lot. I read about how the land ownership worked and how deploying content worked and what the overall ideal is supposed to be, which was that it was like a virtual world. And the way that I kind of interpret it is it's a virtual world that's supposed to have all the properties of the real world in terms of ownership and whether or not something in that world is can be owned by somebody or has actual value behind it.
Hmm.
And so beyond that, I was just looking for a cheap coin to buy, and so I bought some Mana. It was like 20 cents or something. I think compared to people who have known Decentraland a little longer than that, 20 cents is a little expensive. But to me, it wasn't. And
Mhm.
so then that was probably the beginning of 2020. I kind of set it aside and didn't think about it until the end of that year, where you started looking at it. We started talking about it a little more. I think we had conversations like, what is the capability? What's the potential of something like this? My argument was like, this could be an entire world with entire economies in it. It could, bring actual jobs and labor to people who are vastly separated in the physical world, and create new markets that we don't actually have now. And I think we do see that has happened. Of course, it's thought on a scale of millions and millions of people. We do have small economies in Decentraland. We do have people employing people thousands of miles from where they live. Where if you want to trade your items to another game, or you want game items to be tradable, or you want to be able to sell it with people, and you want to have that settlement that blockchain gives you, then you could do that. And at the same time, you'd be able to comply with the all the regulatory needs that there are for cryptocurrencies, because it's a whole different story when you have
Mhm.
financial settlements and things like that. You have to really make sure that you're not violating securities laws and things like that. I really think that that type of setup is ideal, where you can have a network where the partners and the companies participating, they still have rights over their products. I don't
Right.
think that we're ever going to be able to really get rid of that. People are going to want rights over their products. They're going to want to be able to uh, they make changes if they're legally required to. I think that there is a big want for people to own their assets, to be able to take them out of the game, to be able to trade them with their friends for things in other games, or maybe even for money. I think that it is something where that type of partnership could be valuable to game companies, because you could bring a lot of liquidity into one big ecosystem if you wanted to have sort of some like settlement or trading layer
Right.
between gaming companies.
That's really really important to be able to do that. One thing with those transactions, which is helpful, just to add, they can be cross chain when you're transacting. Think about the way you would trade Polygon Matic for Ethereum. You can
Right.
still do a transaction. One party receives Ethereum, the other party receives Polygon, which allows someone that might be on a, for example, for a Binance chain to transact with someone on a Polygon chain. And it won't
Right.
interfere with those. I mean, there will be bridges to get across. And that
Right.
way you
Yeah.
don't have to kind of, you can still stay on chain with all of your assets and currency without having to go off and on. It can be
Yeah.
constantly
I
on and
guess there's that question where I think like the Web3 idealist would say that it needs to be a public blockchain asset to be a real asset that you own.
hmm
And there are people that would say having an association and an agreement with a private company that can do things with your token, they would say that that's not owning it. It doesn't mean that you can't have, like you said, there are bridges that you can make. Like if we had some big gaming chain to make it more efficient, doesn't mean you can't somehow bridge it over public if the people who run that
hmm
agree to do it. It's more, I think, an agreement between who's making the service for you and who's buying it, what they want to come to agreement with one another to do.
Another thing that may be at least something to consider for those who want to own their assets full out, maybe if there is a period of time in a game where you have this asset and it goes through a holding period, at the end of the holding period, it can go to a public chain. And one reason that this would be okay is you go through all of these obstacles, such as you wouldn't really want someone to be able to chop a log and then move it somewhere where you can never get rid of it. Uh, because someone could dupe that. If someone made 100 million logs, went and put them on a public chain, that's terrible for a game. But if there was a time period that someone received a sword, and you had this security system that allowed that sword to eventually be on a public chain and maybe could coexist both ways, then that player could actually own it on a public chain and as well as in the game.
I think that it's kind of the same idea of like maybe there's some way to bridge it
Hmm.
with some sort of criteria. Should be possible. It's just whether or not that ends up being the right answer.
Yeah, Adam said there was a 25 trill dupe in RS a while back. I remember that, and I knew prices of everything was going to go
That's
to the moon with it. That's when party hats. I think blue party hat was 5 billion, or between 5 and 10 billion when that happened. That money, it might have been more than 25
oh,
trillion.
he said it happened just now.
Oh
So
wait, there was another dupe. I'm talking about like 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
that's another reason that I think having like a completely public chain game is really, really hard. Is
It's
that when you program that, you want to make sure that things like duplications aren't going to cause a permanent, lasting impacts on the real economy.
right.
Just ask yourself, like, are you or is the best programming team in the world going to be able to make a million line code base without any errors at all before people play it? If you ask me, the answer is probably not. And so then now it's how do we make sure that that doesn't cause real people to be harmed financially?
Also consider with Bitcoin. I think it was this was 2011 or a year or 2 years after it came out. The network was down for something that needed to be fixed. I don't recall what it was, but that's something simple as sending, receiving, mining, running a node, having a halving. For the most part, those are the main details, and also capping off at 21 million, which will all be dead before that happens. But that's just a few things compared to what a game would need to make it so you think that you're going to put this game out there that's not going to have these flaws of someone duplicating or maliciously attacking it for some type of gain is probably a bit boastful to think that you could do that.
I think it would be beyond that. I mean,
I wonder how Satoshi felt. It's just like, okay, it's out there, you know?
right. If there is a vulnerability, it will be found one day. I mean, and I would say that that's the nature of this industry. That's the nature of what we're all experiencing. I think we've seen stable coins spiral out of control. You
Oh, yeah.
see people hack bridges and steal $100 million. You see tokens go to zero because there's a critical flaw that's found. But that is the game that you're asking to play. And then you're asking on top of that to do extremely complicated interactions with thousands of different types of items and profiles and players. And so I think it's being hopeful or boastful is probably an understatement. It will happen,
My game
and
has no problems.
as a company making a game, you have to think how do you deal with that or handle it because
Right.
like a game like Warcraft or RuneScape, they could take a database snapshot and roll back to that and say, "Hey guys, we're really sorry, but somebody found vulnerability. We patched it. We have to take 2 hours of your game progress away, but it's going to fix the issue. The price of this ore isn't going to crater to zero." You know,
Hmm.
like, and people are going to be upset, but the difference is if that happens on a completely on-chain sort of program, this is written, it's on a blockchain. That blockchain is not likely to fork just for you to fix the problem, and so it's a question of what do you do now,
Hmm.
um, and that's a thing where I think we're well past the point of there are going to be forks to solve these problems, like Ethereum Classic fork, where there was a big program. I don't know if everybody here is familiar with the thing. It was called the DAO, very first DAO, and there was a fundraiser period that was really hyped up, and it came to the end of it, and there was a critical flaw to the contract, and essentially a hacker was able to steal all of the funds that were raised. And this was a huge to do for Ethereum. And to solve that problem, they couldn't just like go back and rewrite the contract. What happened was it caused a fork of blockchain where a lot of people thought, all right, sorry, you're out of luck. This is how it works. It's written in the ledger. This is the game. And then the other half of the people said, okay, no, that's bad. We need to protect people and make sure this type of thing doesn't happen. And so one side split into what is now Ethereum, which actually rolled back and repaired the losses, and the other side went to Ethereum Classic. And the reason it's called Classic is that it's the original ledger,
Mm-hmm.
no modifications, and that's what it took to solve that problem. I think that unless you think that you have enough influence to do that every time there's an exploit in your game, that you
Go
might need to
right,
look
go right
for
ahead.
you might need to look for other options.
Right. First question is going to be about the DAO, and the second one's going to be some potential solutions that you think that could help with the DAO. So, what do you think about the current state of the DAO, and what are some things that you may be beneficial toward improvement?
So like, I guess for one, I don't really involve a whole lot in the DAO or the DAO politics, in Decentraland specifically, just to make sure everybody is on the same page. Decentraland's DAO. Um, the politics and networking for me is kind of nauseating, so I tend to stay away from it. Uh, that being said, it's a really interesting system, and I think it's working to be better. Um, to me, it's hard to judge when I see hundreds of people vote one way and then a few votes a different way, and the way with a few votes is the one that wins. But at the same time, that's how a lot of real world corporate voting works. So it's a question of what's the right way. I know that people are skeptical of other people's identities. You know, crypto people also are skeptical a lot of times of revealing their identity. So I think that it would be good, or a step that I'd like to see at some point would be some sort of compromise between the people who want to remain anonymous and be able to be part of this pseudo anonymous crypto world, and then the people who are of the opinion that the crypto world means we should all be completely transparent and share everything about ourselves with everybody else on chain. I think there needs to be a little bit of a compromise there. Uh, I do think it's important for our votes for it to be a real person. I do think it's important when I see hundreds of people voting on a certain direction that I know those are real people and not just somebody who made an email address and a crypto wallet before a snapshot, right? So I want to know those types of things. I think that people who have more influence, when they look at current status of votes, that would help their decision making process to know how many actual people are behind certain things. And then also that could get rid of a little bit of the trust issues. I think if we had some sort of identity aspect to how the DAO works. I don't think that we should all have to go through some sort of KYC process where we share all of who we are with everybody else in the DAO. I absolutely think that would be one of the worst things. I personally would not participate if I had to do that. So I would not want to have to share all of my personal real life credentials about who I am, about where I live, things like that. But I do think we have solutions in the crypto world without having to divulge my personal information. I can prove to you that I have real credentials, and we can have a cryptographic way of doing that. So I think that would be a good step to take for it. Um, and then past that, when I think about a successful DAO, I think about how true to that term it really is, decentral and autonomous. And so there are various degrees of decentralization, various degrees of autonomy, right? And I would like to see Decentraland move towards being more of both, where when something is decided, it is acted on automatically, and we don't have to worry so much about third party risk or a facilitator risk. That would be a good thing to know. That when an important like core proposal was passed to spend money or something like that, it would be good to know that there wasn't a counterparty risk involved in that. So I think that would be good to in the scope of decentralization. Also, it would be good in the scope of making sure things are automatic. So
Hmm.
I'd like to see that. And then in terms of the actual voting of it, I know that it might not be popular, but I think that there are large holders that could potentially burn large stakes of mana. I don't think that's a crazy idea. If you hold a large stake in mana, you might think that's a crazy idea. But I look at what I think consider to be an extremely successful example of a DAO, which is Maker. So Maker produces DAI, the stable coin that is a decentralized stable coin that still exists, still has not had problems, has never had a default, has real properties in the real world used as collateral. I consider Maker to be extremely successful. They, at a point in 2021, burned tens of millions of dollars of governance stake to further decentralize their network. And I think that was an extremely noble and important decision that they did. So and when I say they, what I mean is the team and the programming team that founded MakerDAO. They took that loss of many millions of dollars to help move the community into making their decisions on their own. And so I'm not saying that right now, tomorrow, if you have 50 million mana, you need to go burn it all. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I think that it would be good to take that idea and start moving the decision making towards the community of people instead of towards the people who built it in the very beginning. And I think that would be good for the decentralization aspect of the DAO. I think in the end of the day, that would make it a more sustainable, long-term sort of organization.
That makes sense. I think that makes a big difference between what can make something successful and also be a major hindrance in the success of something. Especially with this, is to have those people give up that power that's may
Right.
or may not be highly needed in this particular
I mean,
circumstance.
and maybe it doesn't require people burning away a lot of their money.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just use that as an example.
Yeah,
I
it just has
I
to do
know
with
that
giving up
yeah.
the power. I mean, someone with X's proposal, they had a 4 mil VP vote on it. Really appreciate it. I don't really know them, but when you think about it, all we needed was 4 mil VP to pass. They literally just had to vote either direction for the most part, and
Uh,
that was the final
right.
straw. It really didn't matter who else voted at the end of that
Right. I
proposal.
mean, I think that people are creative. We could come up with lots of ways to have addressed that.
Hmm.
And I think that it is important to acknowledge people's investments. I can't sit here and say that, somebody that has 4 million VP doesn't deserve a heck of a big say in how, decisions are made. They have a lot of stake in the ecosystem, and that's to people holding the token, that's really important because it keeps the price of the token
Yeah,
higher.
it's
That
definitely
person
important for the token.
they could go liquidate everything they had and say screw you, and that would really not be good for us. So that's
Right.
of course, like, we could try to brainstorm and say, what if we all had to verify we were a real person, and then every real person had a voting cap of 250,000, or maybe there's a different way of calculating it. Maybe you still got more voting power as you had more stake, but your voting power has diminishing returns as you get more. Like that, I could see, people maybe proposing something like that, and
Hmm.
that could push us towards letting more people make decisions as opposed to fewer people. That's the theme, I think, is more people
Well,
make decisions and not fewer people over time.
Yeah, and just to compare that to more real life style, you have the electoral college. If we did based on popular vote, you take New York, Los Angeles, Houston, Dallas, Chicago, all these major cities, and it really wouldn't matter who else voted outside of that because they are those top cities would be able to make just about every decision out there. Instead of that, they have electoral college that says, "Hey, look, this state's based off this amount of points. This one's based off this amount," which I think I'm not going to sit here and say that the U.S. election system's perfect, but it is definitely has a good option for diversifying the votes across all the states.
I think that Decentraland has districts, and it kind of is a way to, in a sense, mimic that, where you have large areas, and then the voting powers are, given to the people who run those areas, and then they can vote with each other. But
Hmm.
I think that it's interesting because in the U.S. you would still have that district itself have an internal vote,
Yeah,
where, but then again, that's up to that district as to how
right.
they handle that.
So as far as Decentraland is right now, what do you think about the current states? Where do you think the most impactful improvement could be over the
I
next
think
couple of years?
the most impactful thing they can do is make the experience for companies building content smoother, and increase the communication towards the overall infrastructure of the game and how it changes. I know that they do that. I'm not saying they do not do that. I'm saying that as a system where that's really what you need is content creating companies to come in and make content. I think it would be good if there was a little bit more communication in that regard, and if the experience in making the content was improved. And I know that they are on the road to doing that. Like, they are making this new SDK for Decentraland that's supposed to be a lot more flexible, a lot more similar to web design. I think that it's probably a positive direction that they're moving. Um, so I think that it's moving the right way, but it's a question of, are the people building Decentraland, are the people contributing to Decentraland, are they concerned enough about the user experience of the people they're trying to attract into the game? And I think that first and foremost, that user that you're trying to get into the game is the person building content for other people, because if they can build content in a way that's easy to do, they can build smooth working content that's a good experience for their users and bring more people in. That's kind of what I see as the most important question, is
Yeah.
are they going to focus on that and making the user experience for developers and people really building content better? Or are they going to focus on other things that are that maybe occupy their attention?
To think about it like this, Decentraland itself, the foundation or the DAO, they're not made to build the whole thing. They're not made to build all the activities inside of it. That's why they have land and land sales and ownership for that and the SDK.
Right. As somebody building content, it's a really great setup for you, actually. Like, you don't have to worry about a lot of the things that you'd have to worry about if you were building a game completely from scratch. You have to build your backend server that does the backend stuff. That's not anything new to building a game, but usually you have to build a pretty specialized front end and use a game engine of some sort. And Decentraland handles a lot of that for you, where they're running that front end server for you. They are actually injecting the content into the players' browsers for you, and they're handling quite a lot of the like DevOps load that
Hmm.
you would need to build a game. And so as a creator, that's really a great thing. That's like a plus one. I'd like to see them keep making things like that are very helpful for us.
Right. It is helpful if they can make that user or creator experience and development experience good and inviting to people to build and create content for others. That would definitely When it comes to major impacts, I definitely think that's the right route. It feels like the right route at this time for sure. You mentioned at the beginning about the metaverse and how it could create new job opportunities. Coming today, probably a year from that thought of getting in here, a little over that now. What do you think about the future of the metaverse and those things that it could bring? And do you still think that the original things you thought about will still be those
Hmm.
or options for people?
I think that when you ask, like, is the metaverse going to achieve what you thought it was when you first experienced it? It depends on everybody you ask. Like, everybody has a different opinion of what the word even means, like metaverse.
That's for
But if
sure.
you ask me, like, is it going to help bridge economies that wouldn't be bridged and have job opportunities, like, from other parts in the world kind of come together? I think yes. Like,
Hmm.
it will do that. I think it's kind of an inevitable result of this crypto ecosystem that's out there.
Right.
Now, I think that at the same time, the word metaverse is having an identity crisis in terms of what that means. There are a lot of people that think that means that you're going to put a VR headset on and go hang out with your friends in a 3D world. I am not of that group and of that opinion. I do not. That's not how I define metaverse. That's not what I think of when I hear the word metaverse. That those are like metaverse venues, in my opinion. That is a metaverse app. That is a metaverse service. When I think of metaverse, have always thought about a larger ecosystem of crypto organizations
Hmm.
being able to have digital assets and things like that, and then really integrating that technology into those experiences that people have. And so, whether or not it's a 3D world or something, or if it's a banking app online, I think that both of those are kind of transitioning into what people call the metaverse. Like we
Right.
we have banks that are now not necessarily going to be settling things only via ACH transfers and bank wires. You're going to be able to use the crypto technology to have banking apps. And then at the same time, we can use that technology for gaming apps and for other sorts of stuff. I think that's going to be achieved. Whether or not metaverse and that whole 3D thing and I'll have it all the hangouts and that whether or not that's going to be the next huge thing in the world, I don't really know. But I think that the the idea behind it that's been built by the crypto world that's here to stay, and it's going to continue to be built.
Uh-huh. Well, that's a good answer. So basically, the whole VR side of it is just an application, like saying that Windows is the internet.
Right,
It's like it's just
right.
something that you can use to access it and have your own experience.
One of the big things in Decentraland I really like is that there are art venues, and the art in the art venues has verified ownership, as opposed to a lot of like just go Google search art.
Hmm.
Right? When you go to a Google search, there's no verification that Google, as the curator, has any sort of rights over it. And I think it's pretty interesting that you can walk into a place in Decentraland and that's not the case. You can tell who has rights over those things. To me, that's what the metaverse means. You can have
Right.
that on a website without any other experience. You can have that art gallery with this verified ownership there. That's an app in the metaverse from my perspective.
One last question. It wasn't on the list I sent you, but I know that you have opinions about this. You probably don't mind. When it comes to AI, how do you think? Actually, let me back up because I was talking to somebody about this earlier. This is why I brought it up. So I saw something online, a shared tweet. It was like the breakdown of like the past century of the most um, innovation into or innovative industry over each decade. So it starts at like 1920 and goes all the way to where we are right now, where 2010 to 2020 was crypto. Between 2020 and 2030, I'm thinking that it's probably going to be AI. Like it makes sense. That's probably what it's going. Crypto has already reached $1 trillion market value. Maybe it grows to 40, but like like percentage growth, it's not going to be like the number one thing over the next decade, although it'll be huge. When it comes to AI, like, how do you think that integrates over the next throughout this decade and
Yeah,
its use? I know that's a really
yeah,
broad question.
yeah,
Let me
yeah,
just
yeah.
say, based off the use that you are experiencing now,
Right.
where do you think
Yeah, I
that
mean,
goes?
because the reason that anybody would ask this question right now is because ChatGPT exists, right?
Yes.
It's like taking the entire world's attention, and now the question is what is next, and is this the thing that's going to drive a lot of innovation and changes in all of our lives to everything that we do? Right. And that's the question. So to me, AI, I was talking about this the other day. I was saying that, if tomorrow blockchain completely evaporated and Web3 evaporated and I had no job and I had to figure out some other avenue, like
Uh-huh.
I would start learning AI and looking for jobs to do machine learning and AI because it's just fascinating. I like learning the math and stuff behind things I see, so that would be just a lot of fun for me. But as far as what I see it doing is that it's kind of the state of it that as I see it is we know what AI is going to be capable of. Or we're at a point where we understand what we'll be able to use the technology for and what sorts of problems it's going to solve.
Right.
And it's just a question of when certain ones of those problems are going to be solved. And when it is solved, how quickly are we going to be able to use that solution to apply to the masses and everybody out there?
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing for ChatGPT is I don't think any of us, it's like the first time we've experienced chatting with an AI. I think that a lot of us have chat with Cleverbot back in like the 2000s. Like the idea behind ChatGPT existed for a long time now, but now OpenAI has this way of using it where it is so easily trainable for a huge number of applications that
Right.
it's kind of caught tons of attention. And so now let's say, well, what are the big problems AI is going to solve in the next 10 years? Well, are there are lots of things that we need to know the answer to, like how do you make a robot walk? How do you automate a McDonald's in a way that doesn't require people? How do you apply AI to predict markets more efficiently? This is kind of crazy, but people do that. How can AI help us understand pretty much anything
Mm-hmm.
is a question. There are math problems that have been solved and proven only by AI and computer models. And it's not because we are too stupid to figure out the answer, but it's just simply that we don't have the time
Mm-hmm.
for ourselves to go through all the cases. And
Right.
so, what happens when we finally have an AI model that can, in a general sense, learn how to walk, given any sort of, uh, you know, number of feet or environment that it has to walk in? Give it a machine that requires input output voltages to adjust its parts and tell that AI to use that machine to walk. And if it did that, that would be pretty incredible. I think that's going to be a problem that's solved in the next 10 years. Like we're going to have some sort of solve that problem. Another one is that people probably talk about a ton is, automated driving,
Mm-hmm.
where you're not going to have to drive your car anymore. That's a problem that is, super intimately related to AI. And I think that there will be a point where we finally get to a model that's good enough that we can start teaching not just Teslas how to drive, but we're going to start teaching other cars how to drive too. One of the things about that is that there will be somebody who figures out the answer to that question in the next 10 years, but those people are going to have a patent on how they did it
Right.
for a 10-year period. And so we might have a ton of innovation, but OpenAI is set up in a way to give that to everybody without having a patent on it, or
Right.
without holding the rights of it.
Yeah.
There are going to be a lot of innovations that happen that are going to make companies lots of money that the masses, we're not going to have like generic versions for us maybe until 10 or 15 years later. I would be looking forward to patent expirations and things like that.
Right.
Um,
It's interesting. When I first started using, it was actually New Year's, and I was using it a lot. I was at my sister-in-law's house, and I was showing her some cool features that I thought could be helpful. And she said, "Doesn't that just make people dumb?" Um, and the thing is, does it make people dumb? It depends on how you want them to think. How do they need to think? And what I had come and talked to her about when she asked that, because immediately I said, no, it's more of it's not making you dumber. It's making you figure out how to ask questions for something else to figure it out.
right,
Now,
right,
here's where that comes in, and why it's important that it's based on how we think to operate something versus us doing it ourselves. I think if you go back 120 years ago, there was like 95% of the workforce were farmers. So they had to know how to farm, and they probably didn't have they didn't have tractors. Maybe some people
right,
did.
right,
They had to use tools with their hands. They had to know how these seeds work. They needed to know about seasons. They knew everything. They need to know everything about the way to grow something.
right,
If you took the knowledge that they had then, based on farming, most people today, probably the vast majority by far, would be clueless compared to that. Is it important that we know how to farm today? It's not really that important that we know how to farm, but it could be. But it's not right now.
right,
So as you go forward, you get these technology advancements where it's not as important to learn to farm. And then it becomes to the point that it's all these jobs that have just gotten taken by either some type of robotics or mechanical or the assembly line was one of the first things. I mean, it's human made, but it still put a lot of people out of jobs by being able to mass produce particular objects that other companies were making by hand. And then you get to the technology informational age of computers where they started just automating everything. Where I didn't answer this long to her, but the general idea is it makes it so we can be better at asking questions and making those questions and information organized in a way that something else can understand it and give us an output that helps us complete that task. And is it better if we sit there and think about it and figure it out ourselves? It would be great for our brain to practice those things. But for the
mhm.
sake of acceleration on advancing technology, the output of these things, it makes it so somebody that's not a genius can honestly kind of be a genius.
I guess to play devil's advocate against her point, right?
Okay.
If you had a smart person in the room and you were going to ask them to solve a problem for you, and you had that, you knew what you were going to ask them to do, and before you were going to ask them to do that, you were going to give them an option to either use this encyclopedia here that I will provide you, or have free open access to Google and the internet. Which one of those is a smart person going to choose in that situation? I think it's pretty clear that you're going to choose the internet
I
because
mean,
it
right.
contains that encyclopedia,
Yeah.
right? So does moving from using encyclopedias to using Google make you less smart? I think it makes you smarter because you have a tool that you recognize is better at doing the job, and so then you use that tool. I think that's really similar to these things like Chat GPT. Okay,
How is
now
that devil's advocate?
let's back. I'm saying against her point.
uh, I mean, that's kind of for it though, because you're
No,
just
she was
saying
saying
that
it.
the automation is a better option for being able to
I'm
find
saying
the
that
information and
I'm
use.
saying that a smart person would choose Google.
Oh, I mean, look, it depends on who it is. If it's Adam, I think he might prefer to use the Rolodex to find things rather than having it in their phone research
All right.
something.
That's fair. Like some people use an abacus instead of a calculator. I think it's similar. Like with using that versus using Google, devalue your intelligence. I think the answer is no.
I mean, I think it can be. It depends on how you use it. I mean, if you think about this, I think there's to every great technology you have the same.
Yeah,
You can use YouTube to learn and be the brightest person in the world, or you can use it to watch funny cat videos. Which one do you want to do? And I think that has a lot to do with personality traits and people's, what they're trying to accomplish themselves. Although both are fun, I find education very a lot of fun if it's something I'm interested in, and I find something that's just mindlessly playing to let my brain rot some is also enjoyable.
I think it's a matter of when you have something to do and you have a tool bag in front of you, you need to be able to recognize what the right tool to get a job done is.
Right?
And that question, depending on who you are, could be different
Yeah.
depending on what you're asked to do. And so I think what really that's the most important in terms of
Hmm.
what's a smart person going to do is recognize they're going to recognize what tool is better for them. And for some people, it's going to be a better tool to have something create in a template of an email than it is for that person to create the email themselves.
Hmm.
And for other people, that might not be the case. Uh,
Right.
for some people, it might be faster to ask ChatGPT to solve an algebra problem. For me, it wouldn't be. So it's just a question of what's the best tool for the job at the moment. I saw one I thought was a super amazing application of Chat GPT that somebody created for somebody that was a friend of theirs. And so their friend was they worked a plumbing company,
Uh-huh.
and and they had a pretty lacking education, just to be blunt about it. So they had a difficult time composing written words and having like email conversations with their clients. But if you talk to them on the phone, they'd be fine. So that was a big like hindrance for his plumbing business. And so his friend he set up a Chat GPT like integration for him where it would read the email that he received, and then he would type whatever broken English that he could come up with as to how he would start responding,
Hmm.
and then Chat GPT would take both of those and compose it into a really professional sounding email. And this guy has actually been using that, and it's helped him maintain relationships with his clients. So I think that's a really smart thing to recognize, is that that's a
Hmm.
tool that is appropriate for him to use in that situation. Not to
Right.
say that he wouldn't benefit from learning how to compose better written text, but it could be very helpful to have the ability to do that already as you're learning how to do it.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty cool.
That is, and it is helpful. I mean, I honestly struggle with that. You know that. But my brother has recently done that. Not necessarily for answering emails, but for trying to get information together. Like he knows what it is that needs to be done. He doesn't know how to form it in a repository or type of written out uh,
Right, like just a general
piece.
organization. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's able to do that now, and that's also similar to what I've done. Like, hey, I have an idea, kind of help me with that. But also kind of picture it as something that's helped me is like I can sit here and I could think, okay, what would be a cool item to have an X? Let's just break it down to the category of creature. I can sit here
Uh,
and I can Google items and I can look for them, and I could try to do it by myself. But if I were to grab someone else, another person in a room, maybe three or four people that were interested in it with a similar thought process on what it could look like. To brainstorm that, you come out with so many more solutions, and you get the same effect from a chat service like OpenAI. And I think that that's
yeah.
helpful for someone who is trying to be very productive without having to gather a bunch of people to try to figure something out or sit there
Um,
and think about something for a long time that he really didn't need to.
Adam said in the chat. He said that the art ones are 100 times better for game making and I guess basically some concept arting
Mm-hmm.
uh, than than the chat ones are for what they do. I wouldn't say I necessarily agree that it's 100 times better. I'd say it's very useful, but I think he has a great point in that
Yeah.
it saves so much time to be able to type a prompt in and generate a picture. I think we all can, or actually, this isn't true. Not everybody has visualization in their head. People think differently.
Mm.
But I think that a lot of people we visualize in our head when we have an idea, and to take that visual that you thought of and put it into an image somebody else can see, that could take a lot of talent and a lot of time. Uh, and it's
Yeah.
pretty incredible to be able to type in a prompt, and it's not going to get, of course, the exact what you had in mind, but it's going to help you communicate your concept to somebody else, and it's going to do it in a minute.
Yeah.
And so that isn't really, I've heard people say maybe that devalues like what artists do and all this blah blah blah, but you can look at what it makes, and yeah, these AI aren't really making something that's complete right now. There's always something about how an AI solves the problem that
Yeah.
that can be a little uncanny at the moment. Like you'll see fingers get messed up. You'll see that a character has an extra arm. It didn't understand what you asked it. But
Right.
the point still stands. If you needed to make 20 visuals to show other people and you wanted them to be roughly what you had in mind, you can do that now in 30 minutes
Right.
instead of having to have an extremely large amount of talent.
Yeah. Well, about that, I mean, and it's this simple. Okay. So let's say you wanted a person, you wanted them to have a helmet, you wanted them to be holding a bag, you wanted them to have a certain color shirt on, you wanted it to be more modern and let's just say suit like. Okay. They're holding the bag, they're wearing a suit, they got a hat. Now you fix the pants, probably got slacks. It might even assume that. And you got a nice pair of shoes. And boom, that's, once you name all those things, it's going to go after that. The main thing that you may not be able to get too much, well, you can still do that. If you were say it's an angry person wearing a suit, like it's going to come up with that. And when you can just name details, then you can, because you can generate one picture, give it the same information, but generate another one. You can do that 50 times and boom, you get 50 options. You take the top 5 or top 10 that you like, say, hey, look, I'm looking for this general idea. What can you do with it? And I could get I mean, I could try. I bet you I could get 50 prompts in under 20 minutes.
Yeah,
But each prompt sometimes takes 3 to 5 minutes to get. But if you do it back to back fast enough, they'll start coming in pretty quick.
I mean that's with a restricted freemium type thing. Like you pay for it, it happens pretty quick. Um, And then here in the chat, Drager said it's a good starting point. If you have some Photoshop skills, you can patch up any AI art to look good. I think that statement in itself, it's so true about even other applications of AI. Like
Right.
it's a really good starting point for a lot of things. It's a good starting point for writing a small program, actually. If you want to do a small task and say you need to format a number in the right way and you just don't really feel like doing that right now, you can type it in the chat GPT and tell it what programming language you're doing. You could tell it how you need it to be formatted and it's going to more or less spit out for you what you need.
Mm-hmm.
But you always, as the professional using it, you have to edit it for your own needs. You have
Right.
to edit it for sometimes readability. You'll see that maybe it got a small piece of the logic wrong, but it will be a really great starting point. It does do regular expressions, Adam. You can ask it to make a regular expression for all kinds of
Ooh, a
stuff. It's
regular
really
one. Yeah.
really useful. Um, but it's a great starting point for a lot of things. That I think people use it for business emails, something that it's been used for a long time. People don't realize it is advertising and commercials. They use a lot of AI in the process of generating their commercial content. So that that's really useful for them. It doesn't mean they don't have a team that's making those things even more refined, but AI is a big part of the process.
I'm excited to see where it goes. I hope it's not, like
Yeah,
iRobot. I don't think it will. I think that things can get heavily exaggerated.
you know,
Uh,
I would say that I don't think crypto in that world's going to zero, but if it does, then maybe I'll be doing that,
all right,
doing AI
you might
instead.
be doing AI anyway.
Yeah, maybe I'll do both. Who knows?
All right. Well, anyways, Ham, I really appreciate you doing this. It was exciting. I like this. It's a great first start of it, and we're gonna keep going with this and see where it leads.
All right. Well, I do again. Like, I appreciate being the first one. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to the rest of the series.
All right. Well, I will. I'll see you later. Thank you so much, Ham, and
All right.
I'll catch you
Appreciate it.
next time.
All right. Everybody on the stream, farewell, goodbye. Good to be on the stream. Well, when we end our Exodus meetings, we say Exodus out and get off the call. So Exodus out.
Peace out.